listeners, and welcome back to the Arrowverse Crossover Crisis Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley, and this will be the final episode of the Arrowverse Crossover Crisis Podcast. Yes, we have done all of the major crossovers. We did the two-part Legends of Today, Legends of Tomorrow. We did Flash vs. Arrow, The Brave and the Bold. We did the 3 1/4 part Invasion crossover, Crisis on Earth X, Elseworlds, and Crisis on Infinite Earths. And we also did the Supergirl episode, World's Finest, as well as the musical episode, Duet, from The Flash. We even did a bonus episode of Batwoman. But throughout this whole podcast, we've been looking at the relationship between Barry and Oliver, and from my perspective, having not watched the Arrow show, to me that really started in season 1 of The Flash. But we will be going back to season 2 of Arrow and reviewing the 2 episodes where Barry Allen first appears in the Arrowverse. From season 2, episode 8 of Arrow, The Scientist, and season 2, episode 9, 3 Ghosts. Now, I previously had not seen either of these episodes, so I was going in with a sort of fresh take on what Barry was like before he was the Flash and how he first interacted with Oliver. And so let's go ahead and start our review for The Scientist. So there's some sort of cold open in a warehouse where this big guy we don't see anybody, but he takes out some guards, and then it sparks this whole investigation about what the guy took, and that's where Barry Allen comes in. And I love the way Barry's introduced. He's like kind of fumbling over his excuse about being late, and they're like, well, what are you doing here? And I love Oliver's like, and do your parents know you're here? He keeps kind of like making these quips about how young Barry looks, and to be fair, currently watching season 6 of The Flash, looking back on Barry this young, he does look pretty young. So that's kind of a funny interaction there. And of course, he immediately kind of hits it off with Felicity, which is kind of nice. And I did know that they had stated somehow, and I guess this is where that all happened. So it's nice to kind of go back and see that. I do really miss Barry being like a CSI. This season 6 of The Flash, we have been getting a little bit more of Barry going back to CSI roots a little bit more, and I really do like that. And, season 1 and season 2 were my favorite seasons of The Flash. So it's kind of nice just going back to that old Barry and his old personality and being, super smart scientist guy. So I really like that. Then we also get Oliver's mom. We get a previously on segment where she's not in prison anymore. I didn't know she went to prison. From what I gather from this episode, she went to prison because people think she killed Malcolm Merlyn, who is actually not dead. And they have this whole plot line in this episode where Malcolm, I did know he was Thea's real dad. I did know that. But apparently he's the one that killed Tommy, or he's responsible for Tommy's death. I've heard about the Tommy Merlyn character. I had no idea he died this early on in Arrow, because I think people still talk about him to this day like he was like a really good character that people enjoyed. I would not have guessed he died this early on in the Arrow show then, if he's such a fan favorite. But so there's something going on with her and Malcolm Merlyn, and I'm not 100% sure. But in the boardroom of Queen Consolidated, we get Summer Glau, who plays Isabella or something. I didn't know Summer Glau was in the Arrow show. I know her from her work with Joss Whedon, of course Firefly and Serenity, but she was also on Dollhouse. She was in an episode of Angel. She was also in the Sarah Connor Chronicles, that Terminator show with Lena Headey, who played Cersei on Game of Thrones. So she's sort of always in, fan, geek fandom favorite that shows up in a lot of stuff. So it's no surprise that she would pop up on the Arrow show. I just didn't expect it, so I was kind of like, oh wow, she's in this. So that was kind of cool. We also get a bunch of flashbacks. I know that's like an Arrow thing. It also reminds me a lot of the Angel show, also by Whedon. And of course, Oliver's, wig in the flashbacks reminds me a lot of Angel's flashback wigs. Not great. At least Oliver doesn't have an accent he has to try and fake. We get flashbacks with Sarah Lance and Slade Wilson. It took me a while to figure out that was Slade Wilson, because like half of his face was like super black. I couldn't tell if it was supposed to be burned or charred or just painted black. So that's Slade Wilson also there. I didn't know that. Of course, he's Deathstroke. I didn't know that. So these flashbacks, they're supposed to sort of parallel usually what the sort of theme of the episode is. And I don't know enough about the Arrow's flashbacks and Slade Wilson's history and Sarah Lance's history on the island to really sort of make sense of any of these flashbacks within the context of this episode. So, we then get Barry kind of fanboying about the Vigilante, and they keep referring him to as the Vigilante in this episode. I guess he's not Arrow or the Green Arrow yet. And Barry's like, he wants to know all about, the Vigilante, and he's been like, coming up with all these theories about him. And of course, Felicity's like, I don't want to talk about it. And so I like Barry kind of being like a fanboy because, we kind of see that on the first season of The Flash. Barry always really looked up to Oliver, and this is kind of where it all started. And so I really like that. And of course, Oliver has this like bike chase scene, which kind of reminded me of like Batman or something, the Dark Knight, speeding on a bike, doing these car chases. And it's kind of cool. And then that, of course, leads to the clues that helps, Barry helps them solve all these CSI things. And of course, they find out that this guy, the robber guy, he's been like drugged with something. He's got like super strength and superpowers or whatever. And, I like Diggle says, what's next, aliens? Which is kind of like a little nod to the Invasion crossover. No, Diggle, next is not aliens. It is the, Egyptian gods, and then it's aliens. So that was kind of a little fun thing, and also some more foreshadowing. Barry's in the lab, and he's like working with all these chemicals. He's trying to mix them around because it's not safe. And then like lightning's flashing above him. Just a little foreshadowing to how Barry becomes the Flash in the first episode of season 1 of The Flash. So I do like that a lot too. And I like that, also he's found out by Oliver. Barry lied. He said he was a CSI from Central City working on the case. And the captain approved it. Of course, that was all a lie. He just, took a day off of work and came to Star City to work on the case because, he's trying to figure out, essentially we haven't termed them metahumans, but essentially metahumans and maybe who might have been able, killed his mom. So I like Barry's kind of motivation for showing up in this episode. It's kind of nice, and it does take me back to season 1 of The Flash a lot. And then, of course, in the flashbacks, we get Mirakuru, which I know was mentioned this previous season of Arrow and in The Flash After Crisis, and I had no idea what it was or the context of it, so now I kind of understand that a little bit more. It's kind of like super soldier serum that the Japanese created, so that's all kind of cool, and then we get this flashback of them injecting Slade Wilson with it, and seemingly he dies, but my, question is, is this what made Slade Wilson into Deathstroke? I don't know. I haven't watched the rest of the show, but, so that's, that's an interesting sort of little thread hanger there for me. And then, I noticed in the warehouse fight, Oliver takes a lot of damage for a normal person. Like, I know he's like the Green Arrow, and he's in really good shape, but, the human body can only do so much damage, unless you have the super soldier serum, and he doesn't. So I'm just like, it's always TV stuff, but usually it's like, the Flash can take damage because he has speed healing, Supergirl can obviously take damage, but Oliver's just a normal dude. I, kind of want a little bit more verisimilitude in how much damage he takes, although he is knocked out by some sort of poison or drug or whatever. But, I guess maybe the suit does a lot. Well, no, he doesn't even have the padded suit yet. So, I don't know. He takes a lot of damage for a normal guy. Maybe that's... I know some of it you can actually train your body a little bit. I don't know enough about, combat stuff and fighting and whatnot. But I just noticed he gets bounced around a lot and, he comes out of it, so... But then we get the, so Oliver is, kind of knocked out, and so Felicity has to go back to get Barry, and Barry has got this great cliffhanger where Barry wakes up in the Arrow headquarters, and Felicity says, save my friend, and so Barry's going to find out that Oliver is the Green Arrow. So it's a really great cliffhanger ending. I like that a lot. This is a really solid episode. I really did enjoy it. I don't watch a lot of Arrow, so... It's still I'm still getting used to the Arrow style, but I really like Barry's interactions with everybody. I'm not a huge fan of the flashbacks, but I do like sort of the main Arrow cast, at least, Diggle and Felicity, and then we also get some Thea and Roy Harper in this on like a side mission, which I didn't understand what the connection was to the main thing. Maybe I missed something. But of course I know, having seen the final episode of Arrow, I know where their characters go. So, it's kind of interesting seeing them also. And then this whole thing with Malcolm Merlyn is still I'm still confused about. There was a mention of Ra's al Ghul. I guess Malcolm Merlyn trained with him too. I just need to go back and watch the Arrow from beginning. That's really what I need to do. I should do that at some point. But I really did enjoy this episode. As far as Barry and Oliver's relationship, they don't have too much interactions here. Barry spends most of his time with Felicity. But, it's clear that, Oliver and Barry, they have somewhat clashing personalities. But you can tell that they really kind of, respect each other a little bit. And I think that's only going to grow probably in the next episode. So my favorite part of this episode, I think maybe is either the introduction of Barry Allen, or where Barry and Felicity are trying to work the science, and they're just having conversations, and Barry's like fanboying over the vigilante. That's really good. And I really do like Oliver and the Diggle scenes. Those are good too. Oliver also mentions that Barry will definitely be carded at the bar. And that's kind of I like that scene too, because Barry is, then he dances with Felicity, and it's kind of sweet and romantic. But I do like Oliver's jokes, they're kind of funny. So that's probably my favorite part. So now let's move on to the next episode, 3 Ghosts. So this episode opens up pretty much where the last episode left off. Felicity needs Barry's help to save Oliver's life. Barry figures out that Oliver's blood isn't coagulating, or was coagulating too much, I'm not sure. Because then Barry grabs some rat poison as a blood thinner, and he uses that in small doses, I think, and he saves Barry's life. And then Oliver wakes up, and he is not grateful, and because Felicity had to tell Barry about Oliver's identity as the Green Arrow, and so Oliver kind of acts like a little bit of a jerk. But I love here that Barry calls him out on it. He's like, you don't have to thank me, but you should thank her instead of acting like a jerk. So I do like that, and of course Oliver just kind of, is mopey and whatever and walks away. And then Oliver returns home where he helps patch up Roy, who he is the one that shot Roy with the arrow to begin with. And I noticed that they keep referring to the Arrow as the Hood or the Vigilante. And then I believe later on Felicity says Diggle says he prefers to be called the Arrow or something. So I'm not sure when the sort of terminology of name changes takes place, when he goes from, I guess he was called the Vigilante or the Hood, and then he becomes the Arrow, and then eventually the Green Arrow. So it's kind of an evolution. It reminds me of, in season 1 of The Flash, he's referred to as the Blur for a little bit. So I just found that to be a little interesting. And then, of course, we think as a result of the rat poison that Oliver is seeing hallucinations, and then Barry later confirms that's not because of the rat poison. So Oliver's sort of hallucinating these ghost figures of people from those flashbacks. And so he first sees the girl's shadow, and then later he sees Slade Wilson, and then even later he'll see Tommy Merlyn. And so he's going through all these sort of flashbacks, and Diggle says at one point, they're trying to tell Oliver something, and Oliver needs to figure out what it is. And then Barry is, still sticking around, and he's hanging out with Felicity, and he's still super excited about the Arrow, and he's talking about, his past villains. He knows all of the people that the Arrows fought, and then he recommends that he should be wearing a mask, which makes somewhat more sense, because I guess he's wearing he's got the hood, and then he's got some grease paint that he's got under his eyes, which is not very good at concealing his identity. I mean, in proper lighting, you would be able to see that it's Oliver. But also a mask doesn't really conceal too much of the identity either. That's why I miss in the first season of The Flash would just vibrate really fast so that you couldn't really see his face or hear his voice. They did away with that, I think, in season 2. But anyway, so Oliver then, goes to confront the big henchman guy that, we're fighting in these episodes. I like it though because Oliver uses an arrow. He shoots an arrow wire and he uses it to run down the side of the building. Thought that was really cool. I do love when Oliver and these arrow type heroes get to use specialized arrows to do stuff, to sort of superpower them. So I thought that was really cool also. And then in the flashback, we get a flashback showing how the girl Shadow, how she was killed. And, it's this villain guy tells Oliver he needs to choose between Sarah and Shadow, and of course Oliver refuses, but then when the guy goes to kill Sarah, Oliver runs in front of Sarah. The guy assumes that means Oliver chose, and therefore shoots Shadow, so Oliver sort of feels, somewhat responsible for killing Shadow, even though it's not really his fault, but, he feels bad about it, and that's probably why he's seeing her ghost. This episode also, we didn't have her in the last episode, but in this episode we get Laurel Lance. And this is the real Laurel before she died, before she became Black Canary, before it was Earth 2 Laurel, whatever, Black Siren. So this is like Laurel Lance being, lawyer Laurel Lance. And so it's kind of cool seeing her here. I only really see her in these Arrow crossover episodes. I don't really know her as a character. But, she seems to be somewhat of like the legal assistant that can help, people out and, find information. So I liked her here. I thought she was really cool. And then, of course, Barry has a conversation with Felicity about how maybe she likes Oliver and that he can relate because he likes Iris, but Iris doesn't like him back. And then, we get on the screen this countdown to the particle accelerator, and Barry mentions that he might not be there in time. I guess this all takes place around Christmas time, which I didn't know. So that was kind of an interesting, it's like, oh, yeah, the particle accelerator, that's episode 1 of The Flash. So it kind of, this whole episode these 2 episodes kind of recontextualize, the first season of The Flash for me a little bit. So I thought that was kind of cool. And then, Oliver, Diggle tells Oliver to confront the hallucinations. Oliver sees Slade Wilson. And it made me think, does he know that he's Deathstroke at this point? And I'm thinking no by the ending when it's revealed Slade Wilson is alive. I'm thinking he doesn't know he's Deathstroke at this point. So it was kind of interesting, having Oliver see, who he thought was his friend, knowing that he'll be his enemy. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then we get this sort of, the big bad, I guess, is, I guess his name turned out to be Sebastian Blood, which to me was a little too on the nose, because he runs the blood drive. I mean, I don't know who comes up with these names, but he is the one sort of, the second hand to Slade Wilson. He's the one that's, sort of trying to test out the Mirakuru on soldiers or people, turn them into soldiers, super soldiers. So he's got this sort of like scarecrow mask on, and I don't know what it is. It looks like Scarecrow a little bit, and so I'm not 100% sure what that's about, but his name is Sebastian Blood, so I know it's not Jonathan Crane the Scarecrow, but it's a similar character sort of style. But apparently he's the one that's kind of pulling some of the strings, and of course he was out shopping with Laurel, so I don't really know their connection too well, if they're dating or something. But that was kind of interesting about how, having only seen these 2 episodes, I sort of picked up on what was going on by the end of this episode, at least with these sort of villainous characters. And then, of course, Slade Wilson is revealed, and Sebastian Blood's working for him. So, Slade Wilson, is using, sort of some of his blood to try and recreate, the formula to use with Mirakuru. I'm assuming to make sort of some sort of super soldier similar to Deathstroke. So that was kind of cool. So the whole story really kind of this episode really falls around that plot line of trying to figure out who's, working with the Mirakuru. There's a lot of stuff with Laurel Lance's dad and Captain Lance, or I don't know if he's captain at this point, but so I wasn't really paying attention to too much of that. I was mainly focused on the Barry, Felicity, Oliver type stuff. And then, of course, there's some stuff with Roy Harper on the side. I don't know what he was doing. I think he was breaking in to some sort of lab trying to get some evidence or a file. He grabbed a file. I don't know whose name was on the file, so I'm not sure what Roy was doing there. But, I did think it was kind of, at some point I know he works for, he knows who Oliver is the Arrow, and then he works for him also, I think under the codename Arsenal maybe, and he's got like the red suit. So I'm curious as to when that happens, because I don't think he's going to be happy knowing that Oliver's the one that shot him in the leg with an arrow. So I don't know when that reveal happens, but then, the ending sort of, we get Barry, who goes back to Central City in time to try and catch the particle accelerator. And this was interesting, I thought, to me, because I'm not sure, I haven't seen the first episode of The Flash in a while, so I'm not sure if any of this sort of retcons that first episode, because Barry mentioned that he couldn't make it in time, or he couldn't get in line or something for Star Labs. But I definitely remember in the first episode he and Iris were there, because Iris had this whole blog thing going on. She was like reporting on it or something. And so I don't know how that fits in. And I don't remember the exact shot, if it's the same shot in the first episode of The Flash of him getting struck by lightning, or if they reshot it all. So I'd have to go back and watch the first episode of The Flash to kind of piece it all out together. But I do like this does recontextualize the first season of The Flash. And then I thought about it and I forgot, after he gets struck by lightning, he is like in a coma for like a year or something. 9 months, 9 months or something. So I forgot about that because this is like episode 9 of season 2 of Arrow. And then they're not caught up until season 3 of Arrow, season 1 of The Flash. So I guess it would be the second episode, or I guess it's somewhere in the first episode of The Flash. They catch up to season 3 of Arrow, which I did skim through the first episode of season 3 of Arrow, and just to see if Barry popped up. He just makes a small cameo over the phone, which I believe is in the episode of The Flash. And then, of course, Barry gives Oliver his mask to wear, which is, you can still tell that's Oliver Queen, but I guess it's better than not having a mask. So that's all good stuff there, and that sort of, you can see why Barry would then go to Oliver for, some sort of guidance when he becomes the Flash. So I think I like the first part, the scientists, more than I like this episode. This is definitely less Barry, more Oliver, psychological based, and definitely builds up the mystery of Slade Wilson and stuff, which is, again, not since I haven't seen the rest of the season and previous seasons, it's not something I am paying too much attention to, and it's a little confusing, but it was still a pretty good episode, and I definitely see where they're setting up Oliver and Felicity to be an item, possibly. Well, I mean, eventually they are, but here it's sort of, it's more glances and looks, less than overt. They want to be with each other. So it's an interesting episode. I guess the three ghosts refers to Shadow, Slade Wilson, and Tommy, who appear to Oliver as a hallucination. So we get Ghost Tommy, who pops up, and he's sort of the one to give Oliver the message to get back up, keep fighting. You're the hero. You're not the villain. Sort of type of speech, and it kind of encourages Oliver to get back up, and he saves Roy's life, and Roy was injected with the Mirakuru. Somehow he lives. I think it's revealed that his leg wound was healed. So I don't know if Roy has any sort of super soldier, abilities going forward. Maybe that's why he joins the Arrow team. I don't know. So that's all kind of up in the air. But it was, it's a good scene. I don't know Tommy and Oliver's connection well, so I assumed it really means a lot to Oliver, and Tommy doesn't blame Oliver for anything. And so it's a good episode. I don't have enough contacts to really fully understand it, and at some point I will go and watch Arrow, because these two episodes did make me kind of more interested in the rest of these characters and the story that's going on, especially with the whole Slade Wilson build-up thing. So I probably will have to go and visit Arrow soon. So, it's a good episode. My favorite part, I don't know, that's kind of tough. My favorite part might be where Barry tells off Oliver in the beginning. I really liked that. I liked where Oliver was running down the side of the building. I thought that was a lot of fun. And then, of course, he gets up in the end and he takes out that super soldier with the confidence that Ghost Tommy gave him. So I do like those scenes. Those worked really well for me. So that is my review of the episode 3 Ghosts. That's my review of The Scientists. It's been a fun journey here on the Arrowverse Crossover Crisis Podcast. This comes to an end. We have been following Oliver and Barry's journey. I think seeing it begin here really explains a lot, and where they go forward from here. And it explains, that their personalities always clashed and their styles always clashed, but that there was always that sort of amount of camaraderie and respect of one another, and it makes sense why Barry would look to Oliver as his mentor, and eventually, they're both peers at the end of their journey. So I've had a lot of fun, going on this journey with Barry and Oliver throughout these crossovers. It's been a lot of fun. I've had a lot of fun doing the podcast. I know there's other sort of minor crossovers that have occurred between some of the Arrowverse characters, but these have been the sort of main driving force crossovers that, sort of build upon each other and have built the Arrowverse and the whole CW superhero shows. So that's why I chose to focus on these. Maybe at some point in the future I would do a review of maybe each show individually, but I've had a lot of fun doing these. It's, the Arrowverse right now is kind of up in the air with Arrow, the show, gone, and all the other shows are kind of on hiatus right now. Supergirl's future is not looking great. Batwoman's is not looking great. We don't know how long The Flash is going to go on, so it's going to be interesting if there's going to be more crossover episodes or not. If there's going to be any big crisis type crossover episodes going forward. So I don't know about any of the future episodes. If there is another big crossover, next year or something, then I will cover that, and it'll be up here on the channel, of course. But we'll have to wait and see about that. So thank you all for listening, going on this journey with me. All my Arrowverse fans out there, fans of The Flash, Supergirl, Arrow, Legends of Tomorrow. Maybe there's some Batwoman fans out there, and Black Lightning. I still need to watch that show as well. So thank you all for joining me with these crossovers. Thank you for listening. And until next time, if there is a next time, then I'll catch you in the next crisis.